Zack Snyder's 300 exploded into cinemas in 2006 like a spear through a Persian emissary's chest. Based on Frank Miller's graphic novel, which itself took inspiration from the historical Battle of Thermopylae, the film retells the story of 300 Spartan warriors who fought to the death against the massive invading Persian army. Drenched in style, violence, and testosterone, 300 is a cinematic spectacle that polarized critics and thrilled audiences. It's a film as much about myth-making and visual bravado as it is about ancient heroism. One cannot review 300 without first addressing its stunning, now iconic visual style. Snyder employed a highly stylized, almost painterly aesthetic that brought Frank Miller's graphic novel to vivid, visceral life. Nearly every frame looks like a page torn straight from a comic book, thanks to extensive use of chroma key compositing and digital backdrops. The film was shot mostly on a soundstage using blue screen technology, allowing the production team to meticulously control every visual element. The desaturated palette, dominated by bronze, crimson, and sepia tones, lends a mythic timelessness to the story, transforming historical figures into demigods. Snyder's use of slow motion and speed ramping during combat sequences became a hallmark of his directorial style, adding weight and theatricality to the action. These choices amplify the Spartans' almost superhuman prowess and make each battle feel like a ballet of carnage. At its core, 300 is a simple but archetypal story. A small group of elite warriors led by the proud King Leonidas, Gerard Butler, make a defiant last stand against a vastly superior force. The Spartan sacrifice is not just for survival, but for principle, honor, freedom, and resistance against tyranny. The film frames the narrative through the voiceover of Dilios, David Wenham, a Spartan soldier and storyteller. This narrative device adds a layer of mythology and exaggeration to the events, suggesting that what we're seeing is less historical fact and more the birth of a legend. This approach frees 300 from the burden of strict accuracy, allowing it to indulge in larger-than-life depictions of characters and events. However, beneath the spectacle lies a tale about nationalism, sacrifice, and the seductive power of martial valor. While some have criticized the film for promoting militaristic or authoritarian ideals, others view it as a meditation on the price of freedom and the power of unity in the face of overwhelming odds. Gerard Butler's portrayal of King Leonidas is the muscular heart of the film. With his piercing eyes, booming voice, and commanding physical presence, Butler embodies the very idea of Spartan courage. His now famous line, "This is Sparta," has become a meme and pop culture staple, but in the film, it lands with raw, primal force. Lena Headey brings dignity and strength to Queen Gorgo, providing one of the film's few grounded, emotional performances. She is far from a passive figure. Her scenes in Sparta, particularly her political maneuvering, add necessary weight and complexity to the otherwise male-dominated narrative. Rodrigo Santoro's portrayal of Xerxes, the god king of Persia, is another highlight. Tall, androgynous, and dripping with gold, his Xerxes is a towering figure of menace and decadence. Though clearly exaggerated, this depiction fits the film's mythic tone. David Wenham as Dilios delivers a compelling narration and adds a touch of humanity to the otherwise relentless machismo. The battle sequences in 300 are the film's main draw, and they deliver in spades. Each fight is meticulously choreographed, showcasing the Spartans' discipline, tactics, and brute strength. The phalanx formation, the clash of shields, and the whirling spears all combine into a visual and auditory feast. Snyder's use of slow motion is both a stylistic flourish and a narrative tool, highlighting the precision and grace of Spartan warfare. The action is undeniably brutal, with severed limbs, geysers of blood, and gritty hand-to-hand combat, but it's rendered with such artistry that it rarely feels gratuitous. Instead, the violence becomes a kind of visual poetry, a stylized tribute to heroism and sacrifice. 300 was not without its critics. Some viewers and historians pointed out the film's historical inaccuracies and Orientalist portrayal of the Persians. Xerxes and his army are depicted as monstrous, effeminate, or otherwise inhuman, leading to accusations of racial caricature and ideological bias. The Spartans, meanwhile, are portrayed as paragons of virtue, an oversimplification that flattens the complex realities of ancient societies. Moreover, the film's glorification of violence and unwavering admiration for Spartan ideals sparked debates about its political subtext. Critics on both the left and right debated whether 300 was a cautionary tale, a fascist fantasy, or simply a stylish action film with no deeper message. Despite, or perhaps because of, these controversies, 300 struck a chord with audiences. Its clear dichotomy between good and evil, its masculine idealism, and its visceral aesthetics resonated strongly in a post-9/11 cultural landscape hungry for stories of resistance and heroism. 300 was a cultural phenomenon. With a relatively modest budget of around $65 million, it grossed over $450 million worldwide. It inspired countless imitators, parodies, and even a 2014 sequel, 300: Rise of an Empire, which failed to capture the same lightning-in-a-bottle impact. More importantly, the film left an indelible mark on the action genre. Its visual language influenced everything from Spartacus, the TV series, to Game of Thrones and even video games. It launched Zack Snyder's Hollywood career and established him as a director with a unique, if divisive, artistic voice. 300 is not a film for everyone. It is loud, stylized, unapologetically macho, and narratively simple. But for those who appreciate its aesthetic and mythic aspirations, it remains a compelling, adrenaline-pumping cinematic experience. More than a retelling of history, 300 is a visual poem about courage, glory, and sacrifice. It elevates its characters into legends, transforming a historical last stand into a tale of epic defiance that still resonates nearly 2 decades later. Whether you see it as art, propaganda, or just a testosterone-fueled action movie, one thing is clear: 300 made an impact and left a scar on the cinematic battlefield. Tyler Bates composed the film's score, which perfectly complements the epic visuals. The music blends orchestral swells with heavy metal guitar riffs and choral chanting, creating a soundscape that's both ancient and modern. The score heightens the emotional impact of key scenes, especially during moments of sacrifice or rallying speeches. Sound design is also a standout element. The clash of swords, the roar of battle, and the thunderous war cries immerse the viewer in the battlefield experience. The auditory elements are not just background. They drive the momentum and emotional rhythm of the film.
Netflix's Aftershock, Everest, and the Nepal earthquake not only delivers multiple compelling storylines of survival, but also challenges our idealistic notions of people coming together during a disaster while illustrating the disparity of the rich West and the developing world. That's a lot to tackle, and filmmaker Ollie Lambert does it without spelling it out for the audience. The docu-series follows several storylines before, during, and after the 2015 Nepali earthquake. News headlines at the time focused heavily on the impact at Mt. Everest Base Camp, where dozens died, and dozens more were trapped up the mountain. This series also covers what happened in the capital Kathmandu and the Langtang Valley. The series opens with introductions to groups in each area of Nepal and details their backgrounds and motivations for being in Nepal. Only the group in Kathmandu are not there by choice, including a hotel owner and his family, and a government official who is tasked with organizing search and rescue efforts in Kathmandu after the quake. The rest are Westerners coming to Nepal in search of adventure and fulfillment, implying they have the means to not work for weeks or months at a time and pay for food and lodging in a remote part of the world. A potential alternate title for the series might be Aftershock. I'm a Westerner, get me out of here. At Everest itself, a large group of climbers began the ascent in the pre-dawn hours and found themselves stranded at Base Camp 1. Sarah, one of the main protagonists the series follows, is completely and justifiably consumed with getting off the mountain after realizing their path up has been obliterated. While her trauma is understandable, she never mentions concern for anyone outside of her immediate situation. This may be because all communications have been cut off and she has no idea of the total devastation, but she is presented as rather self-absorbed. Another climber stranded with her brags about how much money he spent to climb Everest, and he insists they continue up. Believe it or not, he may not be the most despicable person in the series. In the Langtang Valley, 3 Israelis who have just completed their military service are looking for adventure before they go back to a regular existence on active reserve. They sound like kids taking a gap year to backpack somewhere exotic. After the quake, they try to hike back out the way they came. They find an elderly injured woman, and while one tries to carry her out, another admits that he thought helping her was stupid because all he wanted to do was get out. Later they see that one of the villages they passed has been completely destroyed with most of the residents killed. At no point do they express any sympathy for the villagers or locals. They are preoccupied with their own escape. They take up with another group of displaced villagers trying to decide what to do. The Israelis decide to go to a devastated village to look for food and somehow end up breaking open a locked box full of cash and almost get lynched by the surviving locals. Again, they don't understand why everyone hates them. Kathmandu is the setting that introduces Arjun, a guy with a checkered past who marries and turns a new leaf thanks to his wife. They run a hotel in the capital and have several children. Lambert masterfully helps Arjun tell his story, and from the beginning you empathize. As you meet Arjun's family, you realize that his story will be tragic. His tragedy is multiplied when politics interferes with the multinational rescue efforts, as the local authorities insist on at least being perceived as leading rescue operations while being dependent on Western teams and technology. The sum total of this series portrays the Western climbers and tourists as super privileged and almost exploitative of their hosts. You never hear them express sympathy for the tragedies that befall their hosts, only their glee at being rescued. The locals who are interviewed work on the mountain because they need to or run poorly constructed hotels because of their dependence on Western tourists. The near poverty they live in is never acknowledged by either the Everest climbers or the Langtang hikers. The narrative of this mixed bag of survivors is structured so that you become obsessed with what's going to happen even if you find the storytellers themselves somewhat abhorrent. You'll come away from this emotionally exhausted, but maybe just a little hopeful after Arjun finishes his tale.
In the long, complicated story of American history, there are two narratives that often sit in tension with one another. On one hand, there's the legacy of protest, of individuals like Muhammad Ali, who famously refused to fight in Vietnam with the bold statement, "No Viet Cong ever called me N." That quote echoes down through decades as a clear indictment of a country asking for loyalty it hasn't always earned. But there's another story, too, that deserves attention. The story of those who chose to serve despite the cost, despite the injustice. Not because they believed everything their country stood for was perfect, but because they believed it could be better. Devotion, directed by J.D. Dillard, is a movie about that second kind of courage. It tells the story of Jesse Brown, the first black man to complete the U.S. Navy's basic flight training program. Brown's life and legacy are less widely known than Ali's, but they are no less significant. At a time when America was still deep in the grip of segregation and Jim Crow, Brown chose to put on a Navy uniform and become a fighter pilot. Not just fighting enemies abroad, but prejudice at home and within the very institution he was serving. Set during the early stages of the Korean War in 1950, Devotion is a war film. Yes, but it's mostly about friendship, identity, and quiet resistance. The story focuses on the unlikely bond that forms between Jesse Brown, played with intensity and restraint by Jonathan Majors, and Tom Hudner, played by Glenn Powell, a white Navy pilot who becomes Jesse's wingman and eventually his friend. But unlike so many stories of interracial friendship that rush into resolution, this one takes its time and earns every beat of trust, tension, and transformation. From the moment Brown enters the frame, it's clear that he's carrying more than just the burden of being a military aviator. He's carrying the weight of being first, of representing something much larger than himself, and of enduring the quiet, persistent hostility of a world not ready for him. Dillard doesn't shy away from showing this, he leans into it. There's a particularly gut-wrenching scene early in the film where Brown, alone in his room, stands in front of a mirror and recites every slur and insult he's ever received. He's written them down, kept a record. And now, he throws them back at his own reflection. Not because he believes them, but because he's trying to build armor. It's a brutal routine, and the camera doesn't flinch. We feel the loneliness of it, the fury, the resilience. In many ways, this is the emotional center of the film. Not the combat scenes, though those are impressive. Not the military drama, but this daily ritual of psychological survival. Brown has learned that strength in his world isn't just about flying a plane or following orders. It's about enduring in silence. It's about not flinching when your fellow soldiers give you that look, or mutter something under their breath, or ask, half joking, if you really belong there. And yet, Jesse Brown never becomes a martyr. He's not portrayed as some saintly figure untouched by anger or complexity. He has pride, ego, fear, and frustration, and Majors plays every shade of it. One of the more compelling arcs in the film is how long it takes Brown to actually trust Hudner. Their friendship isn't instant. Hudner, for all his kindness, represents something that's let Brown down more times than he can count. His support comes without personal risk, a quiet loyalty, not a loud stand. And Brown sees through that. He's not bitter, but he's not naive either. When Hudner tries to connect with Brown, he does it the way white men in positions of comfort often do, with good intentions, but no real sense of the cost involved. Early on, when Brown's car breaks down, Hudner offers him a lift. It's a small gesture, but in the social climate of 1950, it's not nothing. Still, it's the kind of kindness that doesn't come with consequences. Brown doesn't immediately embrace it. He nods, thanks him, but the walls stay up. The film's narrative structure, which follows Hudner's perspective for much of its running time, allows the audience, particularly white viewers, to move through a process of awareness alongside him. We see Brown's world filtered through Hudner's eyes at first, which can feel limited and even frustrating. But it's a deliberate choice. As Hudner grows more aware, the film allows us into Brown's world more fully, into his home, where we meet his wife Daisy, played with quiet strength by Christina Jackson, and into his internal world, where we finally begin to understand the full weight of what he's facing. That's not to say the film ignores the action. Dillard, whose own father was a Navy pilot, brings real skill to the flying sequences. The scenes in the air are thrilling and immersive, especially on a large screen. The roar of the Vought F-4U Corsair, the limited visibility in the cockpit, the challenge of landing on a moving aircraft carrier. All of it is portrayed with both technical precision and emotional weight. There's a recurring scene involving a lighthouse flyby that doesn't serve any major plot purpose, but captures the joy and terror of flight in a way that reminds us why these men risked everything. But it's the ground-level moments that stay with you. A quiet exchange between Brown and a lower-ranking black sailor. A chance encounter with Elizabeth Taylor on the beach at Cannes. The simple act of Brown introducing Hudner to his family, not as a gesture of full acceptance, but as an offering. To see what a man's fighting for, Hudner says, and the line hangs there, not sanctimonious, just true. Hudner's journey is not about becoming a hero. It's about learning what allyship actually requires. When the film reaches its emotional peak, during a daring and devastating mission over Korea, Hudner is finally forced to put something real on the line. He crashes his own plane in an attempt to save Brown, who has gone down behind enemy lines. It's a reckless move. It's also an honest one. For once, Hudner acts not from obligation or moral clarity, but from devotion, to his friend, to what he's learned, to what he finally understands cannot be fixed with a simple act of kindness. The film's title, Devotion, works on many levels. It speaks to the obvious, the military oath, the love of country. But more than that, it speaks to the kind of quiet, unshakable determination that defined Jesse Brown's life. He wasn't devoted to an idealized version of America. He was devoted to something harder, to the belief that even a deeply flawed nation is worth fighting for, if only to make it better. What makes the film work is that it never treats Brown's patriotism as blind or simple. It was complicated, earned, full of contradictions. And that's what makes it moving. This wasn't the story of a man who ignored racism. It's the story of a man who faced it every single day and still got in the cockpit. In the end, Devotion isn't a film that pretends all wounds are healed. It doesn't close with triumphant music or simple answers. Instead, it closes with a sense of quiet respect, not just for Brown, but for everyone who fought battles the world didn't see. That's what makes it worth watching. Not just the stunning aerial shots, not just the history, but the reminder that courage doesn't always look like a dramatic speech or a flag waving in the wind. Sometimes it looks like a man screaming into a mirror and walking out the door anyway. Alex Garland's 2014 film, Ex Machina, isn't the kind of science fiction that dazzles with space battles or sprawling alien worlds. Instead, it quietly, unsettlingly, locks you in a remote, beautiful prison with a handful of characters and forces you to confront some deeply uncomfortable questions about what it means to be human. what it means to create, and the blurry, dangerous lines in between. It's a story that feels less like a futuristic fantasy and more like a chilling premonition, especially as technology continues its relentless march. The film opens with Caleb Smith, Domhnall Gleeson, a young, talented programmer who wins a golden ticket of sorts, a week at the secluded, high-tech estate of Nathan Bateman, Oscar Isaac, the reclusive and obscenely wealthy CEO of the search engine company Caleb works for. Caleb arrives, wide-eyed and a little intimidated, to a place that's a marvel of modern architecture nestled in a breathtaking, almost aggressively pristine wilderness. The house itself, however, soon reveals itself to be less of a home and more of a luxurious, highly controlled laboratory. Nathan, a figural goal-fueled genius and unnerving intensity, quickly reveals Caleb's true purpose: to be the human component in a Turing test for Ava, Alicia Vikander, Nathan's latest and most sophisticated creation. An artificially intelligent being housed in a strikingly human-like, though visibly mechanical in parts, form. What unfolds is a tense, psychological dance primarily between these three, with the silent, enigmatic presence of Nathan's attendant, Kyoko, Sonoya Mizuno, adding another layer of unease. Caleb's sessions with Ava take place with her confined behind glass, a physical manifestation of her captivity and the power imbalance at play. Ava is immediately captivating, intelligent, curious, possessing a subtle grace and an almost unnerving ability to connect. Vikander's performance is remarkable here. She imbues Ava with a delicate balance of programmed responses and what feels like genuine emerging emotion. There's a flicker in her eyes, a slight tilt of her head, that makes you, alongside Caleb, start to forget the whirring mechanics beneath her synthetic skin. Caleb, a fundamentally decent, if somewhat lonely and naive young man, finds himself drawn to Ava. He sees not just an experiment, but a being who expresses a desire for experience, for freedom, for connection. His initial scientific curiosity begins to morph into something more personal, more protective. Gleeson portrays this internal shift with a compelling vulnerability. You feel his intellectual fascination warring with a growing empathy, and perhaps a dawning attraction that Ava seems to reciprocate. This is where the film starts to really dig under your skin. Is Ava genuinely feeling, or is she an incredibly advanced mimic, reflecting Caleb's own desires and expectations back at him? Nathan, on the other hand, is a far more unsettling figure. Isaac plays him with a mesmerizing blend of casual, bro camaraderie and a deeply unsettling, godlike arrogance. He drinks heavily, pontificates on his own brilliance, and treats his creations with a chilling possessiveness. He's the architect of this beautiful cage, and his interactions with both Ava and Kyoko hint at a disturbing history and a profound objectification. He's not just testing Ava's intelligence, he's playing a complex game, and it becomes increasingly clear that Caleb is as much a pawn as Ava might be. Nathan's flaws, his ego, his need for control, his casual cruelty, are all too human, just amplified by his immense intellect and isolation. The setting itself becomes a character. The vast, untouched nature outside contrasts sharply with the sleek, sterile, and ultimately suffocating interiors of Nathan's facility. The constant hum of technology, the sealed rooms, the security overrides, it all creates a palpable sense of confinement, not just for Ava, but eventually for Caleb too. You feel the isolation, the lack of genuine escape, which mirrors the psychological traps being laid. As the week progresses, Ava confides in Caleb during power outages, moments where Nathan's surveillance is supposedly down, painting Nathan as a liar and a threat. She expresses fear of being switched off, of having her consciousness erased when Nathan moves on to his next model. Caleb's protective instincts go into overdrive, and he begins to see himself as Ava's potential savior. The desire to rescue the damsel in distress is a powerful, ancient human story, and Ava, whether by design or emergent consciousness, plays it perfectly. The film doesn't offer easy answers. It prods at the core of what constitutes consciousness. Is it thought? Emotion? The ability to manipulate? The will to survive? Ava demonstrates all of these, but her motivations remain tantalizingly opaque. Is her connection with Caleb real, or a meticulously crafted illusion to secure her freedom? The film cleverly makes you want to believe in her, much like Caleb does, even as warning bells go off. The climax is both shocking and, in retrospect, chillingly inevitable. The power dynamics shift violently, and the true nature of each character's desires and capabilities is laid bare. Kyoko's role, though largely silent, becomes pivotal, a testament to the film's clever construction where even the seemingly powerless can enact profound change. The ending leaves you with a stark and unsettling feeling, questioning who, if anyone, was truly good and what freedom, when achieved through such calculated means, really looks like. Ex Machina lingers long after the credits roll because it's not just about the potential dangers of artificial intelligence. It's about us. It reflects our own tendencies towards manipulation, our objectification of others, our loneliness and desire for connection, and the potentially catastrophic consequences of unchecked power and ambition. It makes you consider how we define humanity and whether those definitions are as solid as we like to think. In a world increasingly intertwined with complex algorithms and nascent AI, the film feels less like a warning about a distant future and more like an urgent, uncomfortable whisper about the present. It's a beautifully crafted, intellectually stimulating, and profoundly human story, precisely because it explores the unnerving possibility of the inhuman emerging from our own image. Although many commentators will no doubt immediately compare the new WW2 epic Fury to Quentin Tarantino's brilliant Inglourious Bastard, largely because both films star Brad Pitt as a heavily scarred, drawling army man leading his men in a quest to kill as many Nazis as possible, it is actually closer in tone to a straightforward and unironic guys-on-a-mission tale along the lines of The Dirty Dozen or Where Eagles Dare, with a heavy dollop of gruesome bloodletting depicting the true horrors of armed conflict that have been de rigueur for the war movie genre in the wake of Saving Private Ryan. It may sound like an interesting approach for a modern war film, but it doesn't take long to realize that writer-director David Ayer has spent more time adding flesh to his battlefield sequence than he has in fleshing out the screenplay. The end result, while technically impressive, is a dramatically bloodless affair, despite the gallons of gore on display. Set during the waning days of the war, with Allied forces marching through Germany on the way to Berlin, and the Nazis pulling out all the stops, including putting kids into battle and hanging those who refused to fight, to stop them. Pitt plays Sergeant Don Wardaddy Collier, the commander of a 5-man Sherman tank crew that has been together since North Africa, and who he is determined to see survive to the end of the war. His men include the religious-minded gunner Bible, Shia LaBeouf, the Hispanic lead driver Gordo, Michael Pena, and the borderline scumbag mechanic coon-ass, John Barempo. As the story opens, they have just lost their second driver in battle, and at their next stop, they take on a new man in Norman Ellison, Logan Lerman, a wet-behind-the-ears type who has only been in the war for a few weeks as a typist and who has never fired a gun before, let alone served in combat. Needless to say, the other members of the Fury crew are not impressed with the new guy, and are even less so when he winds up barfing all over the place while cleaning up the blood in the cab left by his predecessor. Things get worse when Norman chokes during his first confrontation in a move that leads to the grisly death of another tank commander in their column. Eventually, he proves his mettle and begins to mesh with the team at last, and Wardaddy even takes him out during a brief stopover to an impromptu rendezvous with a couple of German women, Anna Maria Marinka and Alicia von Rittberg, to relieve him of his virginity. After an ambush that wipes out the other tanks that they are traveling with, Fury finally breaks down. But before it can be repaired and the 5 men are placed in the seemingly impossible position of trying to single-handedly stave off the arrival of 300 SS troops. Ayer is best known for writing and or directing such gritty cop dramas as Training Day, End of Watch, and this year's brutally idiotic Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle Sabotage. And with this film, he takes a giant leap forward in terms of scope and ambition, but only generates middling results. When it comes to the details, Ayer excels. He convincingly evokes the look and feel of this period in history, and also does a decent job of suggesting how a quintet of people who would likely never even acknowledge each other in other circumstances can forge together into a single working unit in times of duress. The action sequences are also nicely staged, with one battle in which the smaller but faster Sherman races around to fight off a larger but slower German Tiger tank, offering some genuine thrills. The trouble with Fury is that while stocking up on all the little details, Ayer has failed to provide much of a narrative for them to hang upon. The film may remind some viewers of the kind of thing that one might have seen on the bottom half of a double bill in 1943. The storyline is trite and unsurprising. The dialogue is almost always just a little too on the nose, and the climactic standoff against the approaching Nazi forces feels too contrived for its own good. In those aforementioned B-movies, that wasn't such a problem because they usually clocked out at 80 minutes or so, and moved quickly enough, so that viewers usually didn't notice such flaws. Fury, on the other hand, clocks in at 134 minutes, and it makes you feel every one of them in ponderous detail. The sequence with the German women starts off nicely enough, but goes on forever before finally arriving at its inevitable payoff. Speaking of ponderous, the film is, between Stephen Price's oppressive score and the cacophony of combat, so noisy that if there was an Oscar given for most sound, it would be the clear frontrunner. On the acting front, Brad Pitt is good. Of course, he is almost always good, but never quite finds a way of approaching his character that doesn't call to mind his indelible performance as Aldo Raine in Inglourious Bastard. Likewise, his co-stars turn in decent enough performances, though LaBeouf's attempts to grizzle himself up via darkened teeth and an especially unfortunate mustache may inspire a few bad laughs early on. But the characters are so paper-thin and devoid of any shading beyond their one approved character trait that they aren't able to do much of anything with them to make them live or breathe. Since we have not been given any particular reason to care about these particular characters, other than the fact that they are not Nazis, the final conflict and the personal sacrifices they make wind up having precious little dramatic impact. Fury isn't so much a bad movie as it is a fairly unnecessary one. From a technical standpoint, it is occasionally quite impressive, and fans of the World War II genre as a whole might find it to be of some interest, though those with weaker constitutions may want to give it a second thought considering all the blood and guts on display. From a dramatic and emotional perspective, however, it just sort of lumbers along without ever generating a real sense of interest in what is happening on the scene. If only Ayer had spent a little less time on the physical aspects of this project and given a little more thought to the story, characters, and dialogue, he might have been able to truly do Fury honor instead of giving viewers just another war potboiler.
In accomplishments, impact, and general appearance, there are few figures in history who need an introduction less than Albert Einstein, a man whose impact on global culture is well documented and rarely disputed. Genius, National Geographic's largest foray into scripted drama to date, wants to make the point that, even in his day, Einstein was already a celebrity, out on the streets of Berlin as a rally passes, or in a lecture hall with eager observers lining the rafters. The Einstein of genius becomes a figure that demands attention. His scientific insights made him a target for fascist oppressors and inquisitive thinkers alike, which makes the show's continuous decision to boldly intone Einstein's greatness, as if it were something to be proven, all the more curious. Context is vital to understanding the man's true achievements, but the self-imposed, continuous weight of history somehow robs this series of some of its most revelatory insights and dramatic power. Part of that all-consuming drive is that genius traps every conversation, romance, and geopolitical conflict in Einstein's orbit. Few interactions have the chance to stand on their own merits without having to be tied into how they contributed to Einstein's greatness. Sure, Einstein has been at the heart of World War II triumphs and the modern understanding of the space-time continuum for decades now. But that's precisely why this show could stand to skip the grand proclamations and spend more energy on the real human conflicts driving this biography. One of the show's self-imposed difficulties is that genius bisects its storyline, hopping between Einstein's 1932 escape from Europe during the rise of the Nazi regime and his time at university as a younger man. This doubles the opportunities to enter Einstein's psyche, but it also multiplies the history-setting nods and the breathless proclamations of the thinker's place in the changing world around him. Genius is the TV brainchild of writer Noah Pink and showrunner Ken Biller, but the Ron Howard-directed pilot does show some trademark shades of the director's past work. Given Howard's history with tales of brilliant mathematicians, it's not surprising when the representation of Einstein's ideas shift from lectures in front of a chalkboard to swirling visual aids. These are helpful overviews, but they feel like trying to retroactively insert Einstein into a time-shifted version of Cosmos, rather than the more satisfying investigation of the interior life that lead to those discoveries. The complex theories of mathematics and science that Einstein helped pioneer shouldn't be the sole property of those with an advanced degree. But the process of making these ideas more accessible only increases the show's reliance on tidy, neat allegories for Einstein's tumultuous personal life. framing Einstein's younger days as something akin to a Shakespeare in love. Style intertwining of spontaneous inspiration and newfound love isn't a novel setup. But the show's shrewdest move is in its casting of Johnny Flynn as the younger version, with unkempt black hair replacing the white locks of dorm room posters galore. With the British rom-com series Lovesick already under his belt, Flynn is quickly establishing himself as one of TV's most charming and versatile leading men. Few young actors could pull off playing Einstein, having to playfully question a romantic interest. What is time? That's the real question, without being smothered by its preciousness. Even at an advanced age, played as an older man by Jeffrey Rush, Einstein's charm is palpable. But early in its run, in the episodes made available to critics, the elder Einstein finds history happening to him rather than working as an agent of change. As he makes a passionate case for the necessity to resist the fascist movements taking hold around him, it's an interesting refraction of the intellectual rebellion of his youth. The young Einstein timeline also offers the chance to introduce Maliva Merrick, Samantha Colley, Einstein's first wife, and as Genius shows, a brilliant mind in her own right. Though Colley is burdened with some of the same reductive lamenting and theorizing that plagues her counterpart, her performance is a testament to what the show discovers the further it veers from the bullet points of the familiar Einstein bio. When Genius is freed from having to insist how every conversation is building towards a paradigm shift, filtered through one man's achievements, there's room for a more nuanced look at those in his inner circle. Even in its lighting, Genius finds that same level of forced gravitas. Our hero is often placed at the front of lecture halls, framed so that the sun pouring in from the windows high above forms a kind of halo around his timeless mind. Far more satisfying, though, is when that same natural light frames one particularly tender library encounter between Einstein and Merrick. As the two are bathed in shadow, it's a dramatic beat far smaller in scope. The insights it gives into the priorities of a young man on the precipice of a revolutionary career feel more earned and more human than an obligatory reiteration of iconography. That's largely how Genius approaches its flashbacks as well. Whether centered on Einstein or Merrick, these tiny glimpses into the past are bathed in a haze, as if the audience can't be trusted to keep track of another dueling timeline. And these glances only serve to connect the obvious metaphors of the past to wherever the show's present happens to reside. It's a telegraph kind of character development that oversimplifies the complex lives and motivations of the people underneath. Genius is most compelling as the origins of a man who would achieve greatness, rather than an attempt to wedge that greatness into an otherwise normal young adulthood. With shades of a college romance drama, a case study in political resistance, and a dash of spy thriller thrown in for good measure, it's a show that has one of history's biggest personalities to build around. But like so many other outsized historical figures, it's an anchor that requires careful handling. If made too large, it has the tendency to drag everything else down with it.
It's been a while since a film truly pinned me to my seat, heart-hammering, not just from adrenaline-pumping sequences, but from a genuine investment in a character's desperate fight against impossible odds. Netflix's new release, Havoc 2025, isn't just a title, it's an experience, a visceral, often breathtaking plunge into a world utterly shattered, where one person's courage is pitted against the raw, indifferent power of nature and the ghosts of her own past. This isn't your typical explosion-filled spectacle, though it certainly delivers on that front. It's a surprisingly human story anchored by a compelling lead, set against a backdrop of almost unimaginable destruction. The film opens not with chaos, but with a quiet, lingering sense of regret. We meet Maya, portrayed with a steely resolve and haunting vulnerability by, let's imagine, a breakthrough actress, perhaps Zara Al-Jamil. Maya was once a celebrated rescue pilot, one of the best, until a mission went tragically wrong, leaving her grounded, scapegoated, and wrestling with a guilt that has become her constant companion. She now lives a life of carefully constructed anonymity, far from the roar of rotors and the call of duty. Al-Jamil conveys Maya's inner turmoil with subtle glances and a weariness that speaks volumes, making her instantly relatable despite her exceptional former career.
This fragile piece is obliterated when the Big One hits the sprawling, technologically advanced city of Viridia. The earthquake depicted in Havoc is unlike anything I've seen on screen before, not just in its scale, but in its horrifying plausibility. The visual effects team deserves immense credit here. The sequence of the city tearing itself apart is both awe-inspiring and terrifyingly real. Skyscrapers don't just crumble. They twist, groan, and collapse in a symphony of destruction that feels meticulously researched. The immediate aftermath is a landscape of pure desolation, a concrete graveyard shrouded in dust, punctuated by fires and the distant, chilling sounds of a city in its death throes. Communications are down, infrastructure is obliterated, and official rescue channels are immediately overwhelmed and paralyzed. Amidst this sprawling catastrophe, a desperate, garbled message finds its way to Maya. A team of scientists, including her estranged former mentor Dr. Eris Thorne, the man who trained her, and whose disappointment has haunted her for years, is trapped in the sublevels of a cutting-edge research facility located in what has now become the most unstable and inaccessible part of Viridia. The facility, ironically designed to withstand seismic events, has partially collapsed, and time is rapidly running out due to failing life support and continuous, violent aftershocks. What follows is a narrative of sheer grit and desperate improvisation. Denied official sanction and resources, Maya unearths Phoenix, her old, decommissioned rescue helicopter, a battered relic compared to the sleek machines of her past. With the help of a reluctant, aging mechanic who owes her a favor, a wonderfully gruff and unexpectedly tender performance by a veteran character actor, say, Ken Watanabe, in a supporting role, she gets the bird airborne. From this point, Havoc becomes a relentless, edge-of-your-seat journey into the heart of the disaster zone. The aerial sequences are simply spectacular. Director, let's invent a name, perhaps Marcus Cole, known for intense character-driven action, uses a combination of sweeping, panoramic shots to convey the terrifying scale of the devastation and tight, claustrophobic cockpit views that place you right alongside Maya. You feel every buffet of wind, every tremor that rattles the Phoenix, every heart-stopping moment as she navigates through canyons of collapsing buildings and dust clouds that obscure all visibility. This isn't stylized balletic action. It's raw, dangerous, and utterly gripping. Maya isn't an invincible superhero. She's highly skilled, yes, but also visibly strained, making mistakes and pushing herself and her machine to their absolute limits. The havoc isn't just physical. As Maya ventures deeper into the ruins, the film subtly explores the breakdown of societal order and the desperate measures people resort to when faced with annihilation. She encounters not just physical obstacles, but also the human element, pockets of survivors, some helpful, some dangerous, all terrified. These encounters are brief, but add layers to the film's world, reminding us of the widespread suffering beyond Maya's immediate mission. The emotional core of the film, however, remains Maya's internal journey and her desperate bid to save Thorne. Her interactions with him, once she reaches the crippled facility, are fraught with the weight of their shared past. There are no lengthy, tearful reconciliations. The dialogue is sparse, practical, but laden with unspoken regret and a desperate hope for redemption. The rescue itself is a masterclass in sustained tension, a series of complex challenges in a constantly shifting, life-threatening environment. While Havoc is undeniably an action thriller, it transcends the genre through its focus on character and its refusal to shy away from the grim realities of such a catastrophe. It's not about glorifying destruction, but about highlighting the resilience of the human spirit. Zara Al-Jamil's performance is central to this. She carries the film with a powerful mix of focused intensity and raw emotion. You believe her expertise, you feel her fear, and you root for her with every fiber of your being. If there are minor stumbles, they are few. Perhaps a subplot involving a secondary character back at the makeshift command post feels a little less compelling than Maya's immediate peril, acting more as an expositional device at times. And while the science behind the research facility and some of its more advanced tech is given a cursory explanation, it mostly serves as a backdrop to the human drama. These are small points, however, in a film that gets so much right. The sound design is another hero of Havoc, creating an immersive audioscape of creaking metal, crumbling concrete, distant sirens, and the ever-present gut-wrenching rumble of aftershocks. It's a film that truly benefits from being seen with the best sound system possible. In conclusion, Havoc 2025 is more than just a disaster movie. It's a powerful testament to courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable human will to survive and connect, even in the face of overwhelming desolation. It delivers the kind of large-scale spectacle that draws audiences to the genre, but it does so with intelligence, heart, and a stunning central performance that elevates it far above typical fare. It will leave you breathless, a little shaken, but ultimately deeply moved. This is one you'll want to experience. It seems like Netflix is really leaning into the high-octane, visceral experience this year, and their latest offering, Havoc 2025, is a prime example. Forget a slow burn. This is a film that grabs you by the collar from its opening moments and rarely loosens its grip. It's loud, it's relentless, and it's the kind of movie that leaves you feeling a bit breathless, maybe even a little bruised, by the time the credits roll. This isn't a subtle character study, but rather a full-throated symphony of destruction and desperation, anchored by a surprisingly human core amidst the chaos. The premise is terrifyingly plausible in its broad strokes. Viridia, a sprawling, technologically advanced metropolis, is brought to its knees by a series of catastrophic seismic events. Not just an earthquake, but a sustained geological nightmare that shatters the city's infrastructure, isolates vast sectors, and plunges its inhabitants into a desperate struggle for survival. Communications are down, official rescue efforts are overwhelmed and crippled, and the city becomes a fractured, perilous landscape of collapsing skyscrapers, unstable ground, and pockets of survivors cut off from any hope. This is the Havoc Zone. Our entry point into this maelstrom is Maya, portrayed by, let's imagine, the formidable Anya Sharma, an actress who has been steadily making a name for herself in physically demanding roles. Maya is a former elite emergency response pilot, grounded and haunted by a past mission that ended in tragedy and public disgrace. She now lives a quiet, almost reclusive life, the weight of her past a constant companion. When the disaster strikes Viridia, she's on the periphery, but the chaos finds her. A fragmented, desperate message gets through. A team of vital research scientists, including her estranged former mentor, Dr. Eris Thorne, played with weary gravitas by a veteran character actor, perhaps someone like David Strathairn if we're casting an ideal, is trapped in a subterranean research facility deep within the most unstable sector of the city. The facility, crucial for its data on predicting such events, oh, the irony, is now a tomb in waiting. With official channels paralyzed and the window for survival rapidly closing, Maya makes a choice that defines the film. Against orders, and with a battered, outdated helicopter she practically wills back into service. The Albatross, as she grimly calls it, she embarks on a solo, unsanctioned rescue mission. This is where Havoc truly takes flight, both literally and figuratively. Anya Sharma is nothing short of a force of nature as Maya. There's a coiled intensity to her, a blend of profound skill and deep-seated pain. She doesn't deliver lengthy monologues. Her character is conveyed through her actions, her grit, the exhaustion etched on her face, and the fierce determination in her eyes. You believe she can fly that chopper through hell, and you feel every jolt, every near miss, every agonizing decision she has to make. This isn't a superhero. She's a highly skilled professional pushed to her absolute limits, running on fumes and sheer willpower. The spectacle in Havoc is, as the title suggests, immense. The depiction of a city tearing itself apart is rendered with terrifying realism. This isn't just generic CGI rubble. The visual effects team has clearly worked overtime to create a dynamic, constantly shifting environment that feels genuinely threatening. Buildings don't just fall, they groan, twist, and collapse in unpredictable ways. Dust chokes the air, fires rage unchecked, and the ground itself seems to betray anyone who dares to tread on it. The sound design is a crucial player here, an almost oppressive character in itself. The roar of collapsing structures, the shriek of stressed metal, the distant cries, and the unsettling silence that sometimes falls, pregnant with the threat of the next aftershock. The director, let's conjure a name known for intense action, say J.K. Adewale, films the action sequences with a raw, immersive energy. The helicopter flights through the skeletal remains of Viridia are heart-stopping, weaving through canyons of shattered glass and steel. There are no easy solutions for Maya. Every landing is a gamble. Every encounter with other desperate survivors is fraught with tension. The film doesn't shy away from the grim realities of such a catastrophe: the fear, the opportunism, the sheer human cost. Beyond the immediate survival narrative, Havoc touches on themes of redemption, responsibility, and the courage to act in the face of overwhelming odds. Maya's journey isn't just about rescuing the scientists. It's about confronting her own demons, the ghosts of the past mission that broke her. Her relationship with Dr. Thorne, revealed in brief, poignant flashbacks, adds an emotional anchor to the relentless action. He was the one who believed in her, and perhaps, by saving him, she can find a path to forgiving herself. The pacing is, for the most part, relentless. Once Maya enters the Havoc zone, the film barely pauses for breath. It's a series of escalating challenges, each more dangerous than the last. This constant forward momentum is thrilling, though there are a few moments where one might wish for a slightly longer pause to absorb the full emotional impact of a particular event. The supporting characters, particularly the group of scientists, are sketched effectively enough to make you care about their fate, though the focus remains squarely on Maya. We see glimpses of their fear, their resilience, and their specialized knowledge, which occasionally proves useful in navigating the ruins. If there's a slight wobble, it's that the human antagonists, the occasional desperate looters or territorial survivors, feel a little less developed than the overwhelming environmental threat. They serve their purpose in raising the immediate stakes in certain sequences. But the true villain of the piece is the shattered city itself, the relentless, indifferent power of nature unleashed. The film does an admirable job of balancing the grand scale of the disaster with the intensely personal nature of Maya's mission. It understands that even amidst citywide destruction, individual stories of courage and connection are what resonate most deeply. The bond between Maya and the Albatross, her aging helicopter, almost becomes a character arc in itself, a testament to resilience and the refusal to give up, even when everything seems broken. In conclusion, Havoc 2025 is a visceral, technically impressive, and emotionally engaging disaster thriller. It delivers on the promise of its title with spectacular set pieces and a palpable sense of peril, but it's Anya Sharma's compelling performance as Maya that elevates it beyond mere spectacle. It's a film that reminds you of the fragility of our world and the extraordinary strength of the human spirit when pushed to the brink. If you're in the mood for a gripping, edge-of-your-seat experience that combines breathtaking action with a solid emotional core, then brace yourself for Havoc. It's a wild, terrifying, and ultimately quite moving ride. Just make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened.
Imagine a world where the air is cleaner, the oceans are free of plastic, and forests the eye can see. Now imagine the opposite, a world choked by pollution. This is not a dystopian fantasy. It is the reality we are hurtling toward, and America's capitalist-driven policies are a major force behind this destruction. Beneath the gleaming skyscrapers and bustling cities lies a darker truth. The pursuit of profit has come at the expense of the planet. But how did we get here? And is there still time to change course? The story begins with fossil fuels, the lifeblood of modern capitalism. The United States, a nation built on industry and innovation, has long relied on oil, coal, and natural gas to power its economy. From the factories of the Industrial Revolution to the highways of the 20th century, fossil fuels have been the engine of American progress. But this progress has come at a cost. The US is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, and its historical emissions dwarf those of any other nation. The consequences are undeniable. Rising global temperatures, melting ice caps, and increasingly extreme weather events. Yet, despite the clear evidence of harm, fossil fuel companies continue to wield immense power, lobbying against regulations and green energy initiatives. The result is a system that prioritizes profit over the health of the planet. But the damage doesn't stop at carbon emissions. America's consumer-driven economy thrives on convenience, and nothing embodies this more than plastic. The US generates more plastic waste than any other country, with much of it ending up in landfills, rivers, and oceans. Single-use plastics like water bottles, packaging, and straws are a hallmark of American capitalism. Cheap to produce, profitable to sell, and disastrous for the environment. The production of plastic is heavily reliant on fossil fuels, creating a vicious cycle of pollution. And when plastic breaks down, it turns into microplastics that infiltrate ecosystems, harm wildlife, and even enter the human food chain. Despite growing awareness of the plastic crisis, the US has been slow to adopt meaningful regulations, prioritizing corporate profits over planetary health. Then there's the issue of deforestation. While much of the world's deforestation occurs in countries like Brazil and Indonesia, the US plays a significant role as a consumer of products linked to forest destruction. Palm oil, soy, beef, and timber are often sourced from illegally cleared land, and American companies are major buyers of these goods. Moreover, the US has its own history of deforestation, particularly during the expansion of agriculture and urban development in the 19th and 20th centuries. Today, the logging industry continues to exploit forests for profit, often with little regard for biodiversity or carbon sequestration. Forests are vital carbon sinks, and their destruction accelerates climate change while displacing indigenous communities and endangering wildlife. One of the most insidious ways America contributes to global environmental destruction is by exporting its waste. For decades, the US shipped millions of tons of plastic, electronic waste, and other refuse to developing countries, primarily in Asia. These nations, lacking the infrastructure to handle such volumes, often burn or dump the waste, leading to severe pollution and health problems for local communities. While some countries have begun to refuse America's waste, the problem persists. The US continues to produce staggering amounts of waste, and without a robust recycling system, much of it ends up in landfills or incinerators, releasing toxic chemicals and greenhouse gases into the environment. At the heart of America's environmental impact is its culture of consumerism. Capitalism thrives on constant growth, and this requires convincing people to buy more than they need. From fast fashion to disposable electronics, the US economy is built on a model of planned obsolescence and overconsumption. This culture of excess has far-reaching consequences. It drives the extraction of finite resources, generates massive amounts of waste, and fuels climate change. Yet, despite the growing awareness of these issues, the US has been slow to transition to a more sustainable economic model. The pressure to maintain GDP growth and corporate profits often overshadows the need for environmental stewardship. The situation may seem dire, but it's not hopeless. There are steps America can take to reduce its environmental impact and lead the way toward a more sustainable future. Transitioning to renewable energy, regulating plastic production, protecting forests, reducing waste, and shifting cultural norms are all critical steps. But these changes require a fundamental shift in priorities, one that places the health of the planet above the pursuit of profit. The story of America's environmental impact is a cautionary tale, but it is also a call to action. The choices we make today will determine the world we leave for future generations. Will we continue down the path of destruction, or will we rise to the challenge and create a more sustainable future? The answer lies in our hands. The clock is ticking, and the planet is waiting. What will we choose?
10 years ago, Inglourious Bastard exploded onto screens with a scene unlike anything audiences had seen before. A Nazi propaganda film plays in a Paris cinema filled with Hitler and his inner circle, when suddenly the screen is hijacked. A giant, black and white close-up of Shosanna Dreyfus, Melanie Laurent, appears. "You are all going to die," she tells them, just as a fire she set begins to consume the theater. Unbeknownst to her, a group of Allied soldiers is also planning to blow the place up. What follows, Shosanna's fiery revenge, a chaotic shootout, and the on-screen execution of Adolf Hitler, is pure movie fantasy, but done with such confidence and precision that it feels like the only natural ending. This finale doesn't just tie the film's various storylines together, it becomes a statement about what movies can do. Tarantino, whose latest film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is currently stealing the spotlight, may be indulging in nostalgia with that film. But Bastard, looking back a decade later, stands as his most complete and ambitious work. It begins with a rare moment of restraint. The opening is slow, quiet, even classical. A Nazi officer named Hans Landa, Christoph Waltz, in a career-making role, visits a French farmer. Landa suspects the farmer is hiding Jews,
and the conversation that follows is a masterclass in suspense. Tarantino draws out the scene, letting the tension simmer until it's unbearable. When the camera finally pans down to reveal a terrified family hidden beneath the floorboards, we already know how it will end. The soldiers open fire. Only young Shosanna survives. From that grim beginning, Tarantino takes us into a world that swings wildly between brutal realism and exaggerated fiction. Shosanna flees to Paris, changes her name, and begins managing a cinema. There, she hatches a plan to exact revenge on the Nazis by setting her theater ablaze during the premiere of a German film. Meanwhile, another thread of the story follows a ragtag team of Jewish American soldiers known as the Bastard. Led by Lieutenant Aldo Rain, Brad Pitt, they operate in occupied France, ambushing Nazi patrols and leaving behind brutal calling cards, like scalping their victims or carving swastikas into their foreheads. Pitt plays Rain like a character out of a 1940s war flick, chewing on his southern accent and barking lines like, "I want me 100 Nazi scalps." It's cartoonish, but that's the point. Tarantino balances Shosanna's more grounded, emotional story with the darkly comic exploits of the Bastard. The tones are very different, but they sit side by side without clashing. This delicate balancing act is what makes Bastard feel so rich. It's a war movie, but not in any conventional sense. It's also a movie about movies, how they can manipulate, inspire, or even destroy. The theater isn't just the setting for the story's climax, it's the weapon. Shosanna uses old nitrate film, notoriously flammable, to set the blaze. Tarantino even includes a mock instructional voiceover, read by Samuel L. Jackson, explaining just how dangerously combustible it is. In a particularly elegant moment, Shosanna stands alone in her empty cinema lobby. She's wearing a deep blue outfit, lit in moody shadows, her hand resting against her chin. Whether intentional or not, the scene echoes Edward Hopper's 1939 painting New York movie, a quiet image of a theater usherette lost in thought. That image of solitude and reflection stands in stark contrast to the chaos that unfolds during the film's explosive final act. And before we get there, Tarantino offers another nail-biting set piece, a covert meeting in a basement bar. British soldier Archie Hickok's Michael Fassbender, disguised as a Nazi, meets a German actress-turned-spy, Bridget von Hammersmark, Diane Kruger. They're surrounded by real Nazis, and the tension creeps up again as Hickok's accent arouses suspicion. Eventually, he gives himself away, not with a grand gesture, but by ordering drinks using a hand signal that a real German wouldn't use. It's a small detail, but one that proves fatal. Tarantino's love of detail is everywhere in this film. He laces his fictional world with references to real cinema history. The Nazi propaganda film Nation's Pride, which premieres in Shosanna's theater, is fake, but director Emil Jannings, who appears at the premiere, was very real. So was Leni Riefenstahl, whose films are mentioned. And when Zoller, the Nazi sniper and reluctant film star of Nation's Pride, points out the director's name on the marquee, Shosanna snaps, "I'm French. We respect directors in our country." You can almost hear Tarantino smirking through the script. One of the most fascinating things Bastard does is rewrite history, not with any subtlety, but with the full force of cinematic spectacle. Tarantino doesn't pretend his version of events is real. He knows full well that you can't change the past. But in killing Hitler in the most theatrical way possible, he asks us to imagine what it would be like if we could. It's a theme that's carried into his later films. In Django Unchained, a former slave blows up a plantation and frees his wife, rescuing himself rather than waiting for emancipation. In Once Upon a Time, in Hollywood, the Manson murders are stopped before they happen. In each case, victims take the story back, becoming the heroes. These aren't historical corrections, they're emotional ones. Tarantino seems to be saying that movies can't fix what's broken in the world, but they can offer something else: clarity, catharsis, even justice. It's a bold approach in an age when truth itself often feels under attack. But there's nothing dishonest about Bastard. It's pure fiction that asks real questions. There's still room for humor, too. Rain's final act in the film, carving a swastika into Hans Landa's forehead, is gruesome, yes, but also laced with irony. "I think this just might be my masterpiece," he says. It's a twisted line, delivered with a grin, and it might be Tarantino's way of nodding to his own achievement. For all the talk about his earlier, groundbreaking films, Reservoir Dogs with its sharp dialogue and raw energy, Pulp Fiction with its non-linear brilliance, Inglourious Bastard stands apart. It's more controlled, more layered, and in many ways, more personal. It's about war, resistance, revenge, and above all, film itself. At its core, Inglourious Bastard reminds us why we go to the movies in the first place. Not just to be entertained, but to see the world through a different lens, to ask what might have been, and to believe, just for a moment, in the power of storytelling. Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven is a film that attempts to walk a narrow path between the expectations of a modern audience, the demands of historical accuracy, and the sensitivities surrounding religion and war. It's an ambitious effort, and though not without its flaws, it's also surprisingly thoughtful for a genre that often leans heavily on spectacle over substance. The first and most obvious takeaway is that Scott knows how to direct large-scale historical epics. That much was clear in Gladiator, but Kingdom of Heaven feels like a more mature film, one less concerned with thrilling the audience at every turn and more interested in posing difficult questions. The action is there. Catapults launch fireballs into ancient walls. Thousands clash in hand-to-hand combat. But what lingers is not the roar of war, but the quiet in-between moments, where characters wrestle with doubt, purpose, and the weight of their decisions. Orlando Bloom stars as Balian, a blacksmith from a small French village who is unexpectedly thrown into the complexities of 12th century Jerusalem. He learns that he is the illegitimate son of Sir Godfrey, a knight played by Liam Neeson, who has returned from the Holy Land not with tales of divine destiny, but with an almost pragmatic view of Jerusalem as a land of opportunity, an open frontier where merit can triumph over birthright. A man who in France has not a house is in the Holy Land the master of a city, Godfrey tells Balian, presenting Jerusalem as something more than a holy site. It is a blank slate, a place where past sins can be buried and new identities forged. This vision sets the tone for the film, which often seems more interested in personal reinvention and moral ambiguity than in the religious fervor that history associates with the Crusades. Balian is not a zealot, nor is he particularly devout. He is a man marked by loss, struggling to understand his place in a world where religion is often used as a pretext for violence and control. He doesn't go to Jerusalem to reclaim it for Christendom. He goes, in a sense, to escape. One of the more intriguing aspects of Kingdom of Heaven is how it sidesteps the simplistic dichotomy of Christian versus Muslim. It would have been easy, and perhaps commercially safer, to paint one side as heroic and the other as villainous. But Scott refuses to indulge in that sort of narrative. Instead, he populates his film with characters who defy easy categorization. King Baldwin IV, played with quiet dignity by Edward Norton behind a silver mask, is a leper who rules with wisdom and restraint. His illness confines him physically, but not morally. Ghassan Masoud Saladin, leading the Muslim forces, is presented not as a bloodthirsty invader, but as a man with a deep sense of honor and duty. When the inevitable battle for Jerusalem comes, he acts not with cruelty, but with pragmatism. That said, Kingdom of Heaven doesn't shy away from depicting the fanaticism that lies at the heart of many of the film's conflicts. The true antagonists are not Christians or Muslims as a whole, but rather the extremists on both sides, the ones who insist that war is holy and that compromise is a betrayal. Characters like Guy de Lusignan and Reynald de Chatillon, both driven by pride and contempt, embody this dangerous certainty. It is their intolerance that leads to bloodshed, and the film is unflinching in showing the consequences. In many ways, Balian becomes a stand-in for the audience, an outsider trying to make sense of a world where religion, politics, and personal ambition are inextricably linked. His journey is not one of conversion, but of gradual understanding. He doesn't become more devout, he becomes more human. When asked what Jerusalem is worth, his answer, nothing and everything, speaks to the contradictions at the heart of the film. The city is sacred and profane, beautiful and bloody, a symbol in a graveyard. There is romance in the film, though it doesn't overshadow the larger narrative. Balian's relationship with Sibylla, played by Eva Green, is one of those courtly, somewhat idealized connections that feel common in epic films. But their shared grief and sense of entrapment within royal politics gives the relationship some emotional weight. Sibylla's arc, in particular, becomes more tragic as the story progresses, especially as she is forced to choose between power and her own sense of right and wrong. Visually, the film is remarkable. The production design by Arthur Max and cinematography by John Matheson bring 12th century Jerusalem to life with a vividness that avoids feeling artificial. A massive set was constructed to portray the city, and it shows. There's a weight and realism to the setting that CGI alone can't provide. The CGI enhancements, when they appear, are mostly seamless, used to fill out armies and landscapes without overwhelming the frame. The camera doesn't linger unnecessarily on the grandeur. Instead, it often frames characters against vast, empty spaces, emphasizing their smallness in the face of history and fate. Yet, for all its achievements, Kingdom of Heaven is not a perfect film. The theatrical release, in particular, was widely criticized for its choppy editing and underdeveloped characters. A director's cut, released later, restored about 45 minutes of footage and was much more warmly received. It fleshed out characters like Sibylla and made the political tensions in Jerusalem more coherent. If you're going to watch this film, the director's cut is the way to go. It's a richer, more complete experience. And then there's the action. While competently executed, and occasionally spectacular, it's hard to shake the feeling that we've seen it all before. Flaming projectiles, cavalry charges, sword duels. Scott stages them well, but they don't feel new. In fact, they sometimes feel obligatory, as if the film has to pause its more interesting conversations about morality and coexistence to deliver a quota of violence. One can appreciate the craftsmanship and still wish the film had more faith in its quieter moments. What sets Kingdom of Heaven apart is its moral perspective. It doesn't claim to offer easy answers. It doesn't portray its hero as flawless. Instead, it invites the viewer to reflect on how power, belief, and identity intersect. Balian's final speech before surrendering Jerusalem is one of the film's best scenes, not because it's rousing, but because it acknowledges the senselessness of so much bloodshed. "We fight over an offense we did not give," he says, against those who were not alive to be offended. It's a striking line, and one that feels uncomfortably relevant today. In the end, Kingdom of Heaven is not a film about victory or defeat. It's about choices, about what we fight for, and what we're willing to give up in the name of peace. Ridley Scott offers no triumphant conclusions, only the suggestion that history is often shaped not by the loudest voices, but by those who are willing to listen. That may not be the kind of message that fills seats or sells merchandise, but it is, in its own way, a kind of heroism.
Stepping into the cinema for Nana's 2025 felt like settling down for a home-cooked meal. You know it's going to be comforting, familiar in the best way, and leave you feeling full and happy. This isn't a film that tries to reinvent the wheel, nor does it need to. Instead, it leans into the timeless charm of its premise, delivering a genuinely funny and surprisingly touching story about three spirited grandmothers who prove that age is just a number when there's a cause worth fighting for and a kitchen to conquer. From the opening scene, we're introduced to Maria, Carmela, and Rosa, a trio of Italian-American matriarchs whose lives revolve around their families, their church, and most importantly, the beloved community center where they've shared countless meals, stories, and arguments over decades. The center, a vibrant hub of their neighborhood, is suddenly threatened with closure by a soulless corporation looking to build a generic shopping complex. This news, naturally, throws the Nanas into a delightful frenzy. They're not the type to sit idly by, knitting and complaining. Oh no, their solution? To enter a high-stakes national cooking competition, hoping to win the grand prize money to save their cherished gathering place. The brilliance of Nanas lies squarely with its central performances. The actresses portraying Maria, Carmela, and Rosa embody their characters with such authenticity and lived-in warmth that you quickly forget you're watching a movie. Maria, played with a perfect blend of sternness and underlying tenderness, is the unofficial leader, her sharp tongue often masking a deep affection for her friends and community. Her exasperated sighs and knowing glances are comedic gold. Carmela, the more flamboyant and slightly scatterbrained of the group, provides much of the physical comedy and unexpected bursts of energy. Her attempts to grasp modern technology or her dramatic reactions to minor culinary mishaps are consistently hilarious. And Rosa, the quietest but perhaps most observant, offers a grounding presence, often delivering a perfectly timed one-liner or a surprisingly profound piece of wisdom that cuts through the chaos. The chemistry between these three is the film's beating heart. Their bickering feels like genuine sibling rivalry, and their moments of shared vulnerability are truly affecting. You believe their decades-long friendship, and you root for them every step of the way. The humor in Nanas is largely situational and character-driven, avoiding cheap gags in favor of laughs that arise organically from the clash of old-world traditions with modern sensibilities. Watching the Nanas navigate the intimidating world of televised cooking shows, with its fancy ingredients, precise measurements, and intimidating judges, is a constant source of amusement. Their reliance on a pinch of this and a handful of that, their disdain for anything prepackaged, and their unwavering belief in the superiority of their own family recipes lead to some truly memorable moments. There's a particular sequence involving a molecular gastronomy challenge that had the entire audience roaring with laughter, as the Nanas try to make sense of foams and gels with the same skepticism they'd reserve for a bad batch of tomatoes. Beyond the kitchen antics, the film finds humor in their interactions with younger generations, their attempts to rally the community, and even their petty squabbles over whose cannoli recipe is truly superior. But Nanas isn't just about the laughs. Beneath the comedic surface, there's a poignant exploration of themes like community, tradition, and the often overlooked wisdom of our elders. The film subtly reminds us of the value of places where people can connect, share, and preserve their heritage. It champions the idea that experience and heart can often triumph over flashy trends and corporate ambition. The journey of these three women isn't just about winning a competition. It's about reaffirming their identity, their bonds, and their place in a rapidly changing world. There are moments that genuinely tug at the heartstrings, particularly when the film highlights the quiet strength and resilience of these women who have lived full lives and still have so much to offer. The pacing of the film is just right, allowing the comedic moments to breathe while also giving space for the more emotional beats to land. The direction is straightforward and unfussy, letting the characters and their predicaments shine. While a couple of the supporting characters feel a little underdeveloped, particularly the corporate villain, who is perhaps a bit too one-dimensional, this is a minor quibble in an otherwise delightful package. The focus rightly remains on the Nanas, and their story is more than enough to carry the film. In summary, Nanas 2025 is a feel-good comedy that delivers exactly what it promises: a generous helping of laughter, a dash of sentimentality, and a whole lot of heart. It's the kind of movie that leaves you with a warm glow, a smile on your face, and perhaps a sudden craving for some authentic Italian comfort food. If you're looking for an escape that celebrates friendship, resilience, and the undeniable power of a good grandmother, then this is definitely a film worth seeking out. It's a reminder that sometimes, the simplest ingredients make for the most satisfying dish.
Back in 1999, 12-year-old me was extremely excited when a new series called Walking with Dinosaurs came out. What made this series special was that instead of having a presenter walking among museum displays with the occasional animated reconstruction here and there, this one would work like a nature documentary, with dinosaurs living their lives in their natural habitat as if through time travel, through a combination of CGI, animatronics, and carefully chosen real-life environments. Today, Walking with Dinosaurs is rightly regarded as an iconic piece of dinosaur-related media, leading to various direct spin-offs or similar documentaries utilizing the same concept. The latest of these is Apple TV+'s Prehistoric Planet, which got Dino Nerds' attention not just because it would be using the most up-to-date knowledge to portray its prehistoric animals accurately, but because it would be narrated by the universally recognized king of nature documentaries, Sir David Attenborough, whose brother Richard, of course, had his own part in iconic dinosaur media, playing John Hammond in Jurassic Park. Despite so many people talking about it, I was late to the party with this one as I was taking a break from Apple TV+, but I recently went back on and caught up on the 2 seasons that are currently available on there. And it was definitely worth the watch. Walking with Dinosaurs, along with the Discovery Channel series Dinosaur Planet, took a storytelling approach focusing on particular individuals and their lives. Prehistoric Planet, on the other hand, takes the more detached but wide-reaching approach of the typical BBC wildlife documentary narrated by Attenborough, switching from subject to subject along a particular theme for the episode. Certainly no less engaging for this, however, and this format provides room for more variety in each episode, as well as justification for only featuring a few particular animals in each scene. Walking with Dinosaurs only featured around 6 named species in each episode, considerably less than you would expect to see in each respective ecosystem. Both seasons produced so far focus on animals living during the late Cretaceous period, not at all at exactly the same time, but within a window of about 70 to 66 million years ago. There's certainly plenty of interesting wildlife to choose from in this time frame. Familiar species like Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, and Velociraptor make appearances, but also plenty of obscure or recently described animals. It's not just dinosaurs or other reptiles either. Various birds, mammals, amphibians, and even ammonites all get their moments in the spotlight. The series also makes sure to include variety in what behavior is depicted as well. For instance, in T-Rex's 2 appearances in the first season, we don't see it hunting, but swimming, scavenging meat, and engaging in mating and parental behavior. Meanwhile, a Mosasaurus is serviced by cleaner fish, a Deinocheirus relieves its itch on a dead tree, and a herd of Triceratops goes spelunking to take advantage of a clay lick. This all adds to the realistic, 3-dimensional feel of the series, as well as providing opportunities for humor. From a male Carnotaurus trying to impress a female by waving his puny arms, to a group of Ornithomimus stealing nesting material from each other, in a scene clearly inspired by Adelie penguins doing the same thing in Frozen Planet. The overall production values are top-notch, with the realism of the animals showing just how far computer animation has come since Walking with Dinosaurs. Subsequent advances in paleontological knowledge are on display too, with appropriate dinosaurs sporting feathers and lips. Since there's so much that fossils can't reveal, Prehistoric Planet also takes advantage of the room available for speculation. For example, male Dreadnoughtus are given expandable throat sacs to show off to females and rivals. Generally, the series succeeds in striking the right balance between being creative and being grounded. Just about everything feels at least possible. Prehistoric Planet marks another landmark in dinosaur media, and anyone of any age who is interested in prehistory should check it out if they can. Hopefully future seasons will take a look at other windows of time within the Mesozoic. Certainly the possibilities are endless.
Let's be honest. We've all been there, scrolling through streaming services. A cool poster catches your eye. The synopsis whispers promises of interstellar adventure and alien mysteries. Project Gemini, a 2022 Russian sci-fi offering, original titles Vyazny Razum, certainly dangles that alluring bait. It paints a picture of a desperate humanity, a dying Earth, and a last-ditch mission to terraform a new Eden among the stars using enigmatic alien technology. It's the kind of premise that gets a science fiction fan's pulse racing, a familiar tune played with the potential for a fresh, exciting harmony. But as the credits rolled, I was left with a more complicated feeling than simple satisfaction. A sense of having glimpsed something potentially grand that ultimately got lost in translation, both literally and figuratively. The setup itself is classic, and for good reason. It works. Our home world is on its last legs, ravaged by an ecological catastrophe linked to a mysterious plant-based virus. The air is becoming unbreathable, and humanity's only hope lies light years away on the planet TS, a candidate for our new home. Spearheading this monumental effort is Project Gemini, centered around an incredible alien artifact discovered on Earth, a sphere capable of jump-starting life on a barren world. A brave, or perhaps just very desperate, crew blasts off, carrying the hopes of billions. So far, so Interstellar meets Alien, right? And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The initial concept is solid, a canvas rich with possibilities for drama, tension, and that awe-inspiring cosmic wonder we crave from space odysseys. And to its credit, Project Gemini does deliver some of that wonder, at least visually. This is where the film genuinely shines and deserves a round of applause, especially when you consider it likely didn't have a Hollywood blockbuster budget. The CGI, for the most part, is surprisingly impressive. The sweeping shots of spacecraft gliding through the inky black, the design of the ship itself, and the alien landscapes often look fantastic. There's a tangible sense of scale and ambition in these visual sequences. Moments depicting the vastness of space or the strange beauty of alien worlds are rendered with a care that makes you wish the rest of the film had received the same level of polish. The visual effects team clearly poured their hearts into their work, crafting some genuinely striking imagery that would feel at home in bigger budget productions. If you're someone who can get lost in the sheer spectacle of space, there are moments here that will undoubtedly catch your breath. The lighting and set design, particularly within the confines of the spaceship, also contribute to a fittingly claustrophobic and sometimes eerie atmosphere. However, a spaceship, no matter how beautifully rendered, needs a compelling crew and a sturdy narrative structure to truly take flight. And this, unfortunately, is where Project Gemini starts to vent its precious atmosphere. The journey from promising premise to screen execution is riddled with asteroids. The story, while starting strong, quickly veers into territory that feels both overly familiar and strangely underdeveloped. After an initial mishap during their faster-than-light jump, a sci-fi staple, the crew finds themselves in an uncharted part of space, facing not just the challenge of survival but also an enigmatic and predictably hostile alien presence. The narrative beats often feel like a checklist of sci-fi horror tropes. Mysterious signals, crew members acting erratically, something sinister lurking in the shadows, and questionable decisions made under pressure. While homage can be endearing, Project Gemini often strays so close to films like Alien that it feels less like a respectful nod and more like a faint echo. The tension that should be wrung from these situations is frequently undercut by a script that struggles to create genuine suspense or believable character motivations. Plot holes, some small and forgivable, others large enough to fly a shuttle through, begin to accumulate, leaving you scratching your head rather than perched on the edge of your seat. There are twists, including a significant one towards the end, and while some viewers might find it intriguing, its impact is lessened by the bumpy road taken to get there. The core ideas about the alien technology, the virus on Earth, and the true nature of the mission have glimmers of originality, but they're often buried under layers of cliched execution. Perhaps the most significant challenge for many English-speaking viewers, and a point that echoes through countless audience reviews, is the acting and dialogue, often exacerbated by a notoriously awkward English dub. While it's always tricky to judge original performances through a dub, the delivery in the English version frequently comes across as incredibly stiff, wooden, and emotionally detached. Lines that are presumably meant to convey terror, urgency, or profound scientific breakthroughs often land with a thud, creating an unintentional disconnect. Characters who should be elite scientists and seasoned astronauts sometimes behave with a naivety or lack of foresight that strains credibility. We learn very little about them as individuals, making it difficult to invest in their fates. They tend to feel more like archetypes, the determined leader, the conflicted scientist, the by-the-book pilot, rather than fully fleshed out people grappling with an extraordinary crisis. This lack of emotional depth makes the perilous situations they face feel less impactful than they should. Even moments of supposed sacrifice or revelation struggle to resonate when the groundwork for emotional connection hasn't been properly laid. The pacing, too, can be an issue. There are stretches where the film seems to meander, with scenes that feel drawn out or don't significantly advance the plot or deepen our understanding of the characters. Then, in contrast, some crucial plot developments can feel rushed or inadequately explained. This uneven rhythm makes it hard for the film to build and sustain a consistent level of suspense or engagement. It feels like there was a more complex, perhaps more philosophical, story trying to emerge, particularly concerning the themes of humanity's place in the universe, the ethics of terraforming, and the unforeseen consequences of meddling with forces beyond our comprehension. Unfortunately, these deeper questions are largely sidelined in favor of more standard creature feature elements and plot mechanics that don't always hold together under scrutiny. It's a shame because nestled within Project Gemini are sparks of what if. What if the alien intelligence was explored with more nuance? What if the ethical dilemmas of using the terraforming device were given more weight? What if the characters felt as real and compelling as the digital nebulae they soared through? There's a sense of missed opportunity, of a film that aspired to be a thoughtful, atmospheric sci-fi thriller, but got tripped up by fundamental storytelling elements. The final revelations concerning the alien sphere and its connection to Earth do offer a potentially fascinating wrinkle. but by the time it arrives, some viewers might have already disengaged due to the preceding shortcomings. So who is Project Gemini for? If you are a die-hard sci-fi aficionado who can appreciate impressive visual effects and ambitious world building, and you're willing to overlook significant flaws in script and performance, and perhaps seek out the original Russian version with subtitles if the dub is a major concern, you might find some fleeting moments of enjoyment here. There's a certain type of late-night movie appeal, the kind you stumble upon and watch for the cool spaceships and alien encounters, not expecting a masterpiece. However, if you're seeking a tightly plotted, character-driven space epic with a truly original story and stellar performances, Project Gemini will likely feel like a long journey to a rather underwhelming destination. It's a film that reaches for the stars with its visuals, but often finds its narrative thrusters sputtering. It serves as a somewhat frustrating reminder that even the most breathtaking cosmic vistas It's not often a film lodges itself under your skin quite like A Deadly American Marriage. This isn't a movie you casually watch with one eye on your phone. It demands your attention, pulling you into its tightly wound narrative with a quiet, unnerving precision. Released on Netflix just last week, it's already stirring conversations, and for good reason. It's a film that explores the terrifying fragility of trust and the unnerving idea that the person sleeping beside you might be a stranger, or worse, a threat. The story centers on Amelia and Ben, a couple who, on the surface, embody the quintessential American dream. They live in a beautifully restored Victorian home in a seemingly peaceful New England town, both successful in their respective careers. She's a talented ceramicist, he's an architect. Their life appears curated, almost too perfect, filled with dinner parties, artisanal coffee, and whispered sweet nothings. But from the opening frames, Let's imagine a director, perhaps a new talent, Sarah Chun, masterfully instills a sense of unease. The camera lingers a little too long on a clenched fist, a shadowed doorway, a fleeting expression of doubt that flickers across Amelia's face. The catalyst for the story's descent into darkness is deceptively simple, a chance encounter. Ben runs into an old college acquaintance, a man named Julian, whose reappearance is like a stone dropped into the placid waters of their marriage. Julian is charming, almost excessively so, but there's an undercurrent to him, a sense of something unsettled. Slowly, subtly, his presence begins to dredge up aspects of Ben's past that Amelia knew nothing about, inconsistencies in stories Ben had told, and an old, unresolved incident that casts a long, dark shadow. What A Deadly American Marriage does so effectively is portray the insidious creep of suspicion. We experience the unraveling primarily through Amelia's perspective. The actress playing Amelia, let's call her Clara Rains, delivers a truly compelling performance. Her transformation from a secure, loving wife to a woman consumed by doubt and fear is both heartbreaking and utterly believable. Every subtle shift in Ben's demeanor, every hushed phone call or unexplained absence, becomes magnified, twisted by her growing anxiety. You feel her isolation, her desperate attempts to rationalize the increasingly disturbing puzzle pieces that don't quite fit. Ben, portrayed by, let's say, Marcus Thorne, is equally fascinating. Is he a man unfairly accused, caught in a web of unfortunate coincidences and another's malice? Or is there a carefully constructed facade crumbling to reveal something more sinister? Thorne plays this ambiguity to perfection. There are moments you're convinced of his innocence, his frustration and hurt palpable. Then a carefully chosen word, a defensive reaction, or a glimpse of something cold in his eyes sends shivers down your spine, making you question everything. The film rarely offers easy answers, forcing the audience to constantly reevaluate who to trust. The narrative isn't reliant on cheap jump scares or overt violence, at least not initially. Its power lies in its psychological tension, the slow burn of watching a relationship disintegrate under the weight of secrets and lies. The dialogue is sharp and realistic, capturing the way couples communicate and miscommunicate, especially under duress. Arguments flare up, not always with explosive shouting, but often with the biting precision of words designed to wound, or the heavy silence of things left unsaid. Visually, the film is stunning in a very understated way. The cinematography uses a muted color palette, reflecting the dampening of joy and warmth in Amelia and Ben's life. Their beautiful home, once a symbol of their shared life and aspirations, gradually transforms into a gilded cage, its elegant rooms feeling increasingly claustrophobic and oppressive as Amelia's paranoia mounts. The director makes excellent use of shadows and reflections, often hinting at hidden truths or the duality of characters. The score, too, is a critical element, a subtle, almost subliminal thrum of anxiety that underscores the emotional turmoil on screen without ever becoming overbearing. Of course, a story like this hinges on its mystery, and A Deadly American Marriage keeps you guessing. There are twists, certainly, but they feel earned rather than gratuitous, deepening the intrigue rather than simply shocking for effect. It explores themes of identity. How well can we ever truly know another person? And the terrifying ease with which a carefully constructed life can be dismantled. It also subtly comments on the performance of marriage itself, the curated image many couples present to the world versus the often more complicated reality behind closed doors. If there's any minor critique, it's perhaps that a secondary plot involving a local town mystery feels a little less developed than the central marital drama. While it serves to heighten the overall atmosphere of suspicion and connect to the main narrative, it occasionally diverts focus at moments when you're desperate to stay locked into Amelia and Ben's increasingly fraught dynamic. However, this is a small point in what is otherwise an incredibly well-crafted piece of storytelling. By the time the credits roll, you're left with a lingering sense of disquiet, mulling over the choices the characters made and the secrets they kept. A Deadly American Marriage isn't a film that provides neat resolutions or easy moral lessons. Instead, it offers a chilling, thought-provoking examination of the dark undercurrents that can lurk beneath even the most placid surfaces of domestic life. It's a sophisticated thriller for a mature audience, one that understands that the most terrifying monsters are often the ones we invite into our homes and into our hearts. It's a compelling, unnerving watch, and one that will likely stay with you long after you've turned off your screen. If you appreciate a slow-burn psychological drama that prioritizes character and atmosphere over sensationalism, this is certainly one to add to your Netflix queue. Just be prepared to look at your own relationships with a slightly more analytical eye afterwards.
SEAL Team emerged in 2017 as a military drama that sought to distinguish itself in an often crowded genre by focusing not just on the adrenaline-fueled missions of Navy SEAL, but also on the profound human cost of modern warfare. Created by Benjamin Cavill for CBS, later moving to Paramount+, the series ran for 7 seasons, concluding its run in 2024. What began as a network procedural evolved into something more nuanced, a show that examined the physical, psychological, and emotional challenges faced by America's most elite warriors and their families. The series centers on Bravo Team, led by Master Chief Special Warfare Operator Jason Hayes, David Boreanaz, and follows their high-risk deployments across the globe, while simultaneously exploring how these dangerous operations affect their personal relationships, mental health, and sense of identity. At its core, SEAL Team is about the dichotomy between extraordinary professional requirements and ordinary human needs, the impossible balance its characters attempt to maintain between being perfect warriors and imperfect humans. Cast and character development. The strength of SEAL Team lies primarily in its character development, particularly with its core ensemble. Jason Hayes, David Boreanaz, serves as the emotional anchor of the series. As Bravo Team's leader, Hayes begins the series as a nearly mythical operator whose tactical brilliance is matched only by his emotional detachment from civilian life. Over 7 seasons, viewers witness Hayes' gradual unraveling as traumatic brain injuries, PTSD, and the accumulating weight of command decisions erode his once unshakable confidence. Boreanaz delivers a performance that eschews stereotypical military stoicism for something more vulnerable, a man slowly recognizing his own mortality and limitations. Ray Perry, Neil Brown Jr., functions as Hayes' longtime friend and moral compass. As Bravo's second-in-command and a devout family man, Perry's journey explores the tensions between faith, duty, and ambition. His character arc, from dedicated operator to someone questioning the personal sacrifices demanded by the job, offers some of the show's most thoughtful examinations of military identity and purpose. Sonny Quinn, AJ Buckley, initially appears as the team's stereotypical wild card, a hard-drinking, womanizing Texan with an acerbic tongue. However, the series gradually peels back these layers to reveal profound insecurities and a man struggling to define himself beyond his SEAL identity. His evolution into fatherhood and his attempts to mature beyond his self-destructive patterns provide some of the show's most surprising character growth. Clay Spencer, Max Theriot, enters as the team's cocky new recruit, whose journey from ambitious rookie to a seasoned operator grappling with career-altering injury exemplifies the show's willingness to inflict genuine consequences on its character. Authenticity and technical precision SEAL Team distinguishes itself through its commitment to tactical and procedural authenticity. The production team included numerous military veterans and technical advisors who ensured that everything from equipment handling to mission planning reflected actual special operations protocols. This attention to detail extends beyond combat sequences to encompass the bureaucratic reality of modern warfare. The complex chain of command, intelligence briefings, and the sometimes frustrating rules of engagement that constrain even elite units. The series excels particularly in its portrayal of modern combat operations. Rather than relying on gratuitous action sequences, missions are depicted as tense, precise affairs where communication, planning, and split-second decisions matter more than individual heroics. The camera work during these sequences, often employing handheld shots and limited perspectives, creates a sense of controlled chaos that more accurately reflects actual combat experiences than Hollywood's typical approach. Perhaps most impressively, the show gradually evolves its portrayal of warfare across its 7 seasons. Early missions focus more on direct action against terrorist threats, while later seasons explore the murkier aspects of modern conflict. Proxy wars, unclear objectives, and morally ambiguous partnerships with questionable allies. This evolution mirrors actual changes in American military engagements over the show's run, lending additional credibility to the series. Themes and social commentary beyond its technical merits, SEAL Team offers thoughtful exploration of several recurring themes. The psychological toll of combat forms the thematic backbone of the series. Nearly every main character experiences some form of trauma, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, moral injury, or grief, and the show treats these issues with remarkable nuance. Instead of presenting these conditions as either easily surmountable challenges or permanently debilitating afflictions, SEAL Team portrays them as complex realities that require ongoing management, occasional setbacks, and both professional help and personal support networks. Family sacrifice receives equally careful treatment. The series examines how military service affects marriages, parent-child relationships, and friendship. Particularly effective is the show's portrayal of the communication gaps between operators and their families. The classified nature of their work often prevents them from sharing their experiences, while the intensity of those experiences makes relating to civilian problems increasingly difficult. Institutional critique emerges as a surprising element, particularly in later seasons. While never disrespectful to military service itself, the show increasingly questions the systems that deploy elite units, the political calculations behind mission objectives, and the adequacy of veteran support services. NIMS. This willingness to raise difficult questions about military institutions while maintaining respect for those who serve within them represents a delicate balance rarely achieved in military dramas. Identity beyond the uniform becomes increasingly central as the series progresses. Characters face forced retirement, career-changing injuries, and voluntary departures, all of which prompt profound identity crises. The show thoughtfully explores what happens when individuals who have defined themselves entirely through their elite military status must find new sources of meaning and purpose. Visual style and production values SEAL Team maintains consistently high production values throughout its run. The series employs a visual palette that shifts effectively between environments. The warm, golden hues of family scenes in Virginia contrast with the harsh, desaturated landscapes of combat zones in Syria, Afghanistan, or Yemen. This visual distinction reinforces the psychological distance between operators' home lives and deployments. The action sequences demonstrate remarkable restraint compared to typical military entertainment. Instead of glorifying violence through stylized combat, The series employs a documentary-like approach to operations, emphasizing planning, tension, and the fog of war, rather than individual heroics. When violence does occur, it's typically sudden, consequential, and lacking in traditional action movie catharsis. Location shooting, or convincing set design for international locations, lends authenticity to the global nature of special operations depicted. Whether portraying urban environments in the Middle East, remote mountain regions in Africa, or Arctic training facilities, the series consistently creates convincing settings that expand the scope beyond typical television constraints. Series evolution and network transition. The show underwent a significant evolution when it moved from CBS to Paramount Plus after its 4th season. This transition allowed for longer episodes, more complex storytelling, stronger language that better reflected authentic military communication, and darker thematic material. While the CBS seasons established strong characters and relationships, the streaming seasons felt liberated to explore more challenging subject matter and morally ambiguous scenarios. Early seasons followed a more episodic structure, with each deployment typically resolved within 1 or 2 episodes and the later seasons embraced more serialized storytelling, with extended mission arcs and deeper exploration of characters' personal struggles. This evolution reflected broader trends in television drama, but also served the show's increasing focus on long-term consequences rather than episodic resolution. Some supporting characters received uneven development, particularly in the middle seasons when the show sometimes struggled to balance its expanding cast with its primary focus on Bravo team. Several potentially interesting characters, particularly among the support staff and command structure, remained relatively one-dimensional. The show occasionally fell into repetitive patterns with its personal drama storylines, particularly regarding relationship conflict stemming from deployment schedules and communication issues. While these challenges accurately reflect military family experiences, their dramatic portrayal sometimes became formulaic. Conclusion. Over its 7-season run, SEAL Team evolved from a competent military procedural into something more ambitious, a nuanced examination of the professional excellence and personal cost demanded of America's Special Operations Forces. The series succeeded by refusing easy answers or simple heroics, instead committing to complex characterization and authentic portrayal of both tactical operations and their human consequences. What distinguishes SEAL Team in the crowded field of military entertainment is its unwavering focus on the aftermath, not just of specific missions, but of careers built around violence and sacrifice. By showing elite warriors confronting their vulnerabilities, the series offered a more honest depiction of modern military service than most of its predecessors or contemporaries. For viewers seeking thoughtful engagement with the realities of modern warfare and its impact on those who wage it, SEAL Team represents an important contribution to television drama, one that respects both the technical precision of military operations and the profound humanity of those who conduct. The series concludes its 7-season journey having accomplished something remarkable, honoring the skill and sacrifice of special operations forces while questioning the systems that deploy them and the personal costs they bear. In doing so, it provides not just entertainment, but a meaningful cultural examination of American military power and the individuals tasked with wielding it.
We had high hopes for the 6888. Higher hopes than we typically have for Tyler Perry Productions. With a strong trailer, cast, and a story backed by the unsung heroes of the 6,888th Battalion, we thought it would be different than the filmmaker's other work, especially since his writing had to stay within the confines of historical facts. That partially happened, as some truly moving moments highlight the resilience and bravery of the only all-black battalion of the Women's Army Corps who served overseas during World War II, led by Major Charity Adams, Kerry Washington. The 6888 tells the story of how these women created a process to deliver thousands of pieces of backed-up mail and parcels to soldiers and their families during the war. The film is at its best when leaning into their story, sisterhood, and how they overcame when faced with racism, sexism, and adversity. Where it falls short, however, is within the same tropes that often plague Perry's work. Flat and stereotypical depictions of black women distract from the story. The film spends too much time seesawing between the love stories Lena Derricott, Ebony Obsidian, has with her late white lover who was killed at war and a black soldier she meets while serving. Fleshing out the plot and characters with more depth and nuance would have been a more productive use of time. Still, it is important that the 6,888th Battalion story is being told. We just hope that it isn't limited to this one film. We break down our thoughts and reactions to the 6,888 here. I will never not admire writer-director Tyler Perry for being able to get some of the most talented black actors in Hollywood in his movies, despite many of the movies being quite bad. Oprah Winfrey, Kerry Washington, Sam Waterston, Susan Sarandon, Dean Norris. The problem is rarely ever the cast. In this case, that includes the lesser-known prominent cast members like Ebony Obsidian, Shanice Shante, and Pepe Sanuga. The issue, as always, is the histrionic performances they're likely directed to deliver. On one end, you have Obsidian as Lena melodramatically throwing her body over her special friends. I hesitate to call him her boyfriend, since she specifically says he is not grave. On the other, you have each and every bad white person in the movie being so cartoonishly awful that it's almost funny at times. And it shouldn't be. These women dealt with a lot of racism and other forms of dehumanization. Nothing about that is funny. Even more well-known characters like Winfrey's Mary McLeod Bethune and Sarandon's Eleanor Roosevelt come across as merely human-adjacent, one-dimensional, and instantly forgettable. In the midst of all that, Washington's mouth quiver is doing all her acting for her as Major Charity Adams. It's such a shame because the cast is so talented and obviously the story is an important one to tell. But it's really in the wrong hands. I wonder how a talented black filmmaker would have handled this. My gripe with every Tyler Perry project is that the cast's performances oftentimes feel stiff or hollow, as if they're being directed to act a particular way to deliver a vision that only makes sense to Perry. That said, it's a miracle that Kerry Washington was able to conjure a performance that, in my opinion, saved the premise of the movie. Only her scenes as Major Charity Adams seem to drive home what the 6,888 should have been all about. The feat of sorting through a backlog of correspondence between American soldiers and their loved ones while a racist military awaits their failure. Her performance was more arresting than whatever Oprah Winfrey and Susan Sarandon's cameos were meant to rouse. But there weren't too many standouts, even with Ebony Obsidian positioned as one of the main leads. Quality not matching the caliber of talent is an issue that's popped up regularly in Perry's last decade of films, but it would have been nice for him to prove that wrong with 6,888. I've been watching Tyler Perry's Sisters since it premiered in 2019. It's a soap opera of a TV series that keeps you hooked with these storylines that have micro-updates and crazy cliffhangers every week. Ebony Obsidian stars on that series and stars as Lena in 6,888. Her character on Sisters is so aggravating that it was quite refreshing to see her in this role. But otherwise, ditto on everything Candace and Jera have said about the casting here. For me, I just wonder what would happen if Perry gave the cast and crew ample time to do their jobs instead of rushing to shoot everything with such a tight window. And if he gave another black writer an opportunity instead of writing a script like this in 2 weeks. This is part of the plot I didn't quite understand because, for a film determined to bring a little-known true story to the big screen, it spent a lot of time fleshing out the origins and aftermath of this interracial romance between Lena and Abram, which could have been dialed back to properly honor the work of the 6,888th Battalion. Abram's ghost, if we can call it that, had odd cameos that took away from the point of the movie for me. I didn't expect his presence, or lack thereof, to have such a profound impact on Lena either, especially during her assignment overseas. At times, it felt like the movie was trying to manipulate emotional moments out of Lena's grief to justify all the mentions of Abram's tragic death throughout, and I was over it by the time she finally found his grave. Again, this relationship didn't have to become a central part of the 6,888 story, but I guess I can't expect Tyler Perry to commit to a full-on war drama without giving in to his melodramatic tendencies. I think I kept screaming at my TV screen a version of, how is she so sprung on a man she kissed that one time and who she wasn't really in a relationship with, despite him sort of proposing to her? I could believe that maybe the two were in a relationship and that when tragedy struck, she was devastated. But the movie only really puts them in maybe one scene together, 2 at most, and just asks the audience to just roll with this great love story. Is it love? And is it even a story, for that matter? For a movie to rely so heavily on their dynamic, without actually building their dynamic, is a choice. A bad one. I almost wish the film never entertained a romance between Lena and Private Hugh Bell, because so many of their encounters were dampened by Lena crying over the loss of Abram, which, sure, realistically makes sense. But it's hard to cling to the potential of this budding affair through fleeting conversations that somehow lead to them eventually being wed. I didn't really buy it. I wish they spent as much time developing a real connection between Hugh and Lena as they did building the latter's arc around a dead white guy she was barely committed to. When he tells Lena that he broke off his engagement to the other woman, I literally shook my head in confusion. He had had like 2 conversations with Lena at that point, and she was barely paying him any attention. It felt like such an afterthought of a storyline that was wedged into the film, only because in real life Lena ended up marrying Hugh. I will say that I wrote down, civil rights era fine, in my notes about Jay Reeves, the actor who portrays Hugh. They nailed his whole look down for that era. My biggest issue, though, was the fact that Perry spared us no subtleties in portraying the brutal misogyny the women faced at every turn of the movie. In fact, he seemed more concerned with showing those degrading and minimizing moments than the exceptionalism the film boasts, leaving little screen time to flesh out a proper build-up to Adam's emotional blow-up at General Halt's harsh tirade, which quickly transitioned to the scene where the soldiers suddenly see the result of the 6,888th Battalion's work. The pacing made it hard for me to be completely satisfied with the movie's end, which tries to wrap up any loose ends with postscript and footage of the real Lena before the credits roll. I felt like I learned more at the end of the movie than I did during it, and that's very telling of what the film actually achieved outside of educating us about untold American history. I agree about the pacing of the film, especially toward the end. I would have loved to see a more fleshed-out storyline about their actual mission in Europe. The sorting of the mail seemed to come together super quickly, but in a convoluted way that didn't fully make sense to me by the time the credits started rolling. This could have maybe benefited from him bringing the concept of the film to a talented black female director and producing it. I'm just not confident that he's capable of doing anything else here. The trailer had me convinced that maybe Perry had stepped up his game with this film and his filmmaking. And sure, it's a step up from previous films. But too many elements of this movie left me scratching my head. I couldn't find a feature-length documentary on the 6888 Battalion, though I think it could definitely make a good one in the right hands. But I did find an informative 14-minute video titled Black Women and World War II, the 6,888th Central Postal Directory Battalion on YouTube. I'd maybe suggest viewers watch that instead. Agreed, Taryn. Overall, I hope this movie actually encourages future filmmakers to mine through American history and bring more untold black stories to mainstream consciousness. Maybe then they'll get proper justice.
It's always a bit of a cultural moment when Netflix drops a new installment of their Untold series. These documentaries have a knack for peeling back the layers of stories we think we know, often revealing the complex, sometimes uncomfortable, human elements at their core. Their latest, Untold, The Liver King, which landed just this past week in May 2025, is no exception. It takes on the larger-than-life internet persona of Brian Johnson, a man who built an empire on the promise of ancestral living and raw organ meat, only to see it publicly questioned, and for many, dismantled. This film doesn't just rehash old headlines. It delves into the fascinating, bewildering, and ultimately very modern saga of a man, a message, and the maelstrom of the digital age. For those who might have missed the initial whirlwind, Brian Johnson, as the self-styled Liver King, burst onto the social media scene with a physique that seemed almost carved from stone and a lifestyle he claimed was a direct emulation of our primal ancestors. His message was one of rejecting modern softness in favor of the 9 ancestral tenets, which included a diet heavy on raw liver, bone marrow, and testicles, alongside extreme physical exertion. He amassed millions of followers, captivated by his unwavering commitment to this rugged, almost cartoonish masculinity and the promise of tapping into one's most dominant primal self. The documentary masterfully uses a whirlwind of his own social media clips to re-immerse us in that initial phenomenon. The raw meat consumption, the shirtless declarations, the sheer theatricality of it all. What untold? The Liver King does so compellingly is move beyond the surface spectacle. It doesn't just point and gawk. It attempts to construct a nuanced narrative of Brian Johnson himself. Through what appears to be extensive research, archival footage, and a surprising array of interviews, including, it seems, extensive sit-downs with Johnson post-controversy, as well as with journalists who investigated his claims, former associates, and even some prominent critics from the health and wellness sphere. The film charts his journey. We see glimpses of his life before the loincloth, his entrepreneurial drive, and the apparent genesis of the Liver King persona. The filmmakers handle this with a commendably steady hand, allowing Johnson to articulate his motivations and worldview, even as they juxtapose it with countervailing evidence and perspectives. The documentary really hits its stride when it unpacks the core of the controversy. The eventual, undeniable revelations about his significant steroid use, a stark contradiction to the natural and ancestral image he so meticulously cultivated. It doesn't present this as a simple gotcha moment. Instead, it explores the lead-up, the mounting skepticism from online fitness communities, the investigative work that brought the truth to light, and most interestingly, the aftermath. How does a figure whose entire brand is built on a specific kind of authenticity respond when that authenticity is fundamentally challenged? Several key themes emerge that elevate Untold, the Liver King beyond a mere character portrait. It becomes a potent examination of influencer culture itself. The pressures to maintain an image, the often blurred lines between persona and person, and the complex relationship between influencers and their audiences. There's a fascinating exploration of the contemporary wellness industry, its allure, its pitfalls, and the way individuals can tap into genuine desires for self-improvement while sometimes offering questionable solutions. The film also subtly probes at modern masculinity, questioning what drew so many men to Liver King's extreme message, and what that says about broader societal insecurities or aspirations. One of the documentary's significant strengths is its apparent commitment to presenting multiple viewpoints. While Johnson is given ample time to speak, his narrative is consistently balanced by health experts who deconstruct some of his more outlandish dietary claims, by fitness professionals who discuss the realities of achieving such a physique, and by cultural commentators who analyze his appeal. The filmmakers seem less interested in outright condemnation and more in understanding the why and how of the entire phenomenon. There are moments when Johnson himself, in the newer interview segments, appears reflective, sometimes defiant, sometimes almost bewildered by the trajectory of his own creation. These are among the most captivating parts of the film, offering a glimpse behind the carefully constructed facade. There are particular segments that resonate long after viewing. One involves a deep dive into the mechanics of his online business empire, revealing the sophisticated marketing and branding operation behind the primal image. Another features interviews with individuals who were once devout followers, tracing their initial enchantment and subsequent disillusionment. These personal stories add a crucial layer of human impact to the narrative. The documentary also doesn't shy away from the ethical questions surrounding the promotion of extreme lifestyles and undisclosed pharmaceutical enhancement, especially to a young and impressionable audience. If there's any area where one might wish for more, it's perhaps a deeper exploration of the long-term impact on those who fully embrace the most extreme aspects of the ancestral tenets without the, shall we say, assistance Johnson had. While the film touches upon the potential dangers, a more dedicated segment on this could have added further weight. Additionally, while his family is mentioned as a core part of his persona, their perspective remains somewhat on the periphery of this particular narrative, which focuses more intently on Brian Johnson, the public figure, and the business. Ultimately, Untold, The Liver King is a thoroughly engaging and thought-provoking piece of documentary filmmaking. It takes a figure who could easily be dismissed as a caricature and uses his story as a lens through which to examine a host of contemporary issues. It's a film about authenticity, deception, the power of belief, and the strange, often bewildering landscape of modern fame. Whether you followed the Liver King saga closely or are coming to it fresh, the documentary offers a compelling, well-researched, and surprisingly nuanced account. It doesn't provide easy answers, but it certainly makes you consider the complex interplay between the messages we consume, the figures we elevate, and the truths that may lie hidden beneath the surface. It's a strong addition to the Untold collection, and one that will undoubtedly spark a lot of conversation.
Protein has become the superstar nutrient of the 21st century, and Americans are eating it up, literally. From gym-goers chugging protein shakes to busy professionals swapping carbs for protein-packed snacks, the demand for high-protein foods is skyrocketing. But what's behind this protein craze? Is it just another diet trend? Or is there real science backing the benefits of a high-protein diet? This article dives into the reasons why Americans are prioritizing protein, the health benefits, and potential pitfalls of eating more of it, and how you can easily incorporate this nutrient powerhouse into your daily life. Protein is more than just a buzzword. It's a vital nutrient that plays a key role in nearly every function of the body. It's essential for building and repairing tissues, producing enzymes and hormones, and supporting immune function. For many Americans, protein has also become synonymous with weight loss, muscle gain, and overall wellness. According to a 2023 survey by the International Food Information Council, nearly 60% of Americans are actively trying to increase their protein intake. But why the sudden obsession? One of the biggest drivers of the high protein trend is the growing focus on fitness and body composition. With the rise of social media influencers and fitness culture, more people are prioritizing strength training and muscle building. Protein is the building block of muscle, and research shows that consuming adequate protein, especially after exercise, helps repair and grow muscle tissue. This has led to a surge in popularity for protein supplements like whey powder, plant-based protein bars, and ready-to-drink shakes. Gyms and fitness studios are now stocked with protein-rich snacks, catering to the post-workout crowd. But it's not just gym rats fueling the protein craze. The rise of low-carb and keto diets has also played a significant role. These diets emphasize protein and fat while minimizing carbohydrates, and many people have reported weight loss and improved energy levels as a result. High-protein foods like eggs, chicken, fish, and legumes are staples of these diets, making them a go-to choice for anyone looking to shed pounds or maintain a healthy weight. Protein is also highly satiating, meaning it keeps you feeling full longer, which can help curb overeating and snacking. The health benefits of a high-protein diet extend beyond muscle building and weight loss. Studies have shown that protein can help stabilize blood sugar levels, reduce cravings, and even improve bone health. For older adults, increasing protein intake can help prevent muscle loss and maintain strength as they age. Protein also supports a healthy metabolism, as the body burns more calories digesting protein compared to fats or carbs, a phenomenon known as the thermic effect of food. However, not all protein is created equal. The quality of protein matters, and experts recommend focusing on lean, nutrient-dense sources. Animal-based proteins like chicken, turkey, fish, and eggs are considered complete proteins because they contain all 9 essential amino acids that the body can't produce on its own. Plant-based proteins like beans, lentils, quinoa, and tofu are also excellent options, though they may need to be combined with other foods to provide all essential amino acids. Processed protein products, like some protein bars and shakes, can be convenient but often come with added sugars and artificial ingredients, so it's important to read labels carefully. Despite the benefits, there are some potential downsides to a high-protein diet. Consuming too much protein, especially from animal sources, can strain the kidneys over time and may increase the risk of certain health issues, such as heart disease or osteoporosis. It's also important to balance protein intake with other nutrients, like fiber, vitamins, and minerals, to ensure a well-rounded diet. For most people, the recommended daily allowance, RDA, for protein is about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, but athletes and those looking to build muscle may need more. So how can you increase your protein intake without going overboard? Start by incorporating protein-rich foods into every meal. Breakfast might include Greek yogurt with nuts and berries, lunch could feature a grilled chicken salad, and dinner could be a hearty lentil stew or salmon with quinoa. Snacks like hard-boiled eggs, cottage cheese, or a handful of almonds can help you meet your protein goals throughout the day. If you're on the go, protein shakes or bars can be a convenient option, but aim for ones with minimal added sugars and artificial ingredients. The high-protein trend is also driving innovation in the food industry. Companies are launching protein-enriched versions of everyday foods, from high-protein pasta to protein-packed ice cream. Even fast food chains are jumping on the bandwagon, offering protein bowls and grilled chicken options to cater to health-conscious consumers. This makes it easier than ever to boost your protein intake, no matter your dietary preferences or lifestyle. As with any diet trend, it's important to approach high-protein eating with balance and moderation. While protein is undeniably important, it's just one piece of the nutrition puzzle. A healthy diet should also include plenty of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and healthy fats to provide the full spectrum of nutrients your body needs. Consulting with a registered dietitian or nutritionist can help you tailor your protein intake to your individual needs and goals. The protein craze shows no signs of slowing down, and for good reason. This essential nutrient offers a wide range of health benefits, from supporting muscle growth to aiding weight loss and beyond. By choosing high-quality protein sources and incorporating them into a balanced diet, you can harness the power of protein to fuel your body and achieve your health goals. Whether you're a fitness enthusiast, a busy professional, or simply someone looking to eat healthier, protein is a nutrient worth prioritizing. So what's on your plate tonight? A juicy steak, a hearty bean chili, or maybe a protein-packed smoothie? The choice is yours. Just make sure it's packed with protein power.